Rwanda has a long, rich history. It was first settled by the Uruguay culture in the first millennium BC. Traces of that culture still remained in Rwanda as far along as 12 to 1600 AD. The Twa people today, the minority population in Rwanda, still practice the same pottery techniques that the Uruguay culture used. Of note on the Rwandan origin stories, one of them speaks about Gihanga, who was one of the first kings of Rwanda, and he brought the skill of pottery, vessels, tools, spears to the land. So the cultural memory and the historical evidence still actually lines up pretty well. Through the 1600 to late 1800s, prior to colonials coming into Rwanda, the Rwandan kings had a centralized state and policy of expansionism. They started out in central Rwanda and kind of expanded their borders outward. They had professional armies that were made up of the sons and the people of lesser chiefs and families. And so even though there were different clans and different classes in the country, the army was made up of people of all the groups. So it had a very unifying central effect on the land. Surprisingly, the borders that the Rwandan kings established were very similar to the borders, the official borders that occurred during the colonial era. The Tutsi, Hutu, and Twa are still the people of Rwanda today. Today they are considered or have been considered ethnic racial distinctions. But in Rwanda's history, they were more societal, more class distinctions. The native language word that the Belgians were using for race actually means class or clan and not ethnicity. So the Twa were the hunter-gatherers. They're a very minimal percentage of the population. The Hutu were the farmers, and the Tutsi were the cattle owners, the wealthy landowners. And so just like in other societies, that it is always possible to move within those classes. The Hutu farmers could acquire cattle, could acquire wealth, and they would be considered and adopted into the Tutsi clan, just as Tutsi were capable of losing their wealth and then being considered Hutu. And so the society was really built on kind of that relationship. The people of Rwanda didn't live separately. They lived together in communities, and they had all classes were in each of the communities. Something that still is remains that way today. One of the things that was talked about when studying looking at the genocide was that it was neighbor on neighbor. You know, you could be a Hutu living beside a Tutsi, and so that kind of discontent and fear, once the identity distinctions were ethnic in the society, there were kind of hard lines drawn, and it kind of changed the way that Rwandan society developed. And I don't want to downplay the genocide. It's one of those things that it seems like a lot when you're studying and looking it up on Google that Rwandan history is almost defined by the genocide. But in all actuality, it had a very long history established before that occurred. This is just a culminating event over time. that happened. So it kind of does a disservice to the country and its people to not study the lengthy richness of its culture to fully, appreciate it.